Hey everybody and welcome to Freelance. But I'm going to be covering items that are not selling on eBay and Amazon, mostly because shipping is pricey, but there's some other things you want to look out for. And before I get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel, comment below your own input on items that you don't like selling on eBay or Amazon. And we're going to jump right into it here. One of the main things that people tend to overlook when they're looking for something to purchase online is the bulkier stuff. Now they might find it's something very valuable at a local auction and or somewhere else, but the biggest issue is the cost for shipping that item to another location. Now, you might be able to flip it locally through something like Facebook Marketplace, but when you're shipping online, there are some substantial costs that are involved. So let's say you found a nice piano, for example. Now, pianos are very, very heavy. You're looking at thousands of pounds. So is it practical to ship through U.S. Postal Service? No, not really. And you're likely going to be shipping through UPS or FedEx. And the problem with that is that the cost can go up and up and up to hundreds, even thousands of dollars in shipping. So is it really worth it to resell that online and or purchase it in the first place? In a lot of cases, the answer is no. So you'd be better off looking for somewhere local to sell a more bulkier item. Now, some of it's probably confusing, but it's to show the more obscure items that you might find online and or elsewhere that you might think hold value, and they might hold value, but the problem with them is they are more niche than your normal particular items that you would find at a thrift store or something like that. And in turn, that results in finding it harder to find a buyer. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that what you God will not sell, but you're going to have a hard time unloading said item. One of the best ways you can do that through eBay, at least. And Amazon offers the Amazon Seller app that can show you how often things are selling and their ranking and stuff. But through eBay, you just want to do sold and completed listings. You can find that right on the left of the page after you do a search, and it'll show you everything that's sold recently. I just have Reebok here up, for example, but you know, anything that's sold recently for that particular niche, and you can see if what you're trying to sell in particular is popular enough to actually bother to ship it out, even with shipping costs and fees and insurance and stuff, especially if it's a more obscure item, because people are going to expect better care for it and it not to arrive damaged because they're more likely going to be a collector in that regard. More common sense items here. If something you're shipping out is very fragile, on the same token, it's going to be very expensive. Fragile items can break, obviously, and that means you have to get insurance on them. You have to get extra shipping costs on them for extra shipping, handling, care. Basically, to handle your package more gently, you have to pay for that, and that in itself can add up. Some of the costs can be quite substantial, anywhere from like 5, 10, $15, and so on and so forth. Depending on where you ship, in a U.S. Postal Service case, right now it's currently $11.15, and that's so that they can handle your package carefully. So if you're selling something fragile, you might want to make sure that it's actually having some value to it, because you're paying $11.15 for just the special handling, and then you're paying for some additional fees from shipping and insurance, and you're paying PayPal fees, and you're paying taxes at the next year. So are you really going to make enough profit to make it worth it for you for the return on investment for that particular product that you might be trying to sell? And in most cases for fragile items, it's going to be no, unless you're selling something over $100, and even then you're going to have a hard time making much money on that. More fragile stuff, it's better to try to sell locally rather than online. You can still turn a profit depending on how much profit you could potentially make from it and how cheap you might have got it locally, but you're going to have a hard time trying to unload it for profit online because of all these other fees, plus the extra cost for just shipping it as a fragile item. Another common sense one here is hazardous items. Now, hazardous items, you're going to run into, of course, because they're hazardous, and hazardous items are going to cost more money to ship because they have to take extra precautions, just like the fragile one. So if you had a fragile product that is also hazardous, it can cost a lot of money. So a lot of people are trying recently with like pandemic and stuff like that, or COVID-19, that essentially they're trying to sell hand sanitizers and stuff, but a lot of people are probably running into the fact that they didn't realize the hand sanitizers are going to be labeled as hazardous materials, which means that the shipping costs are going to cost more, and they have to take extra precaution, and that in itself can add up to a lot of cost. And therein in itself, this is just an example of FedEx costs here. The surcharge for packages containing hazardous materials is $27.50 per package. That is almost double the cost for the just special handling of fragile items. Now, the only difference is that it's a hazardous material and it could potentially leak and stuff like that. But then, in the same token, you have to factor in that you're going to have to package it more securely. You're going to have to basically make sure you're doing something more than just packing peanuts, and you're going to have to really make sure that it stays still in the shipping process, because even with careful handling and things like that, accidents can happen. So you want to make sure it's secure in the package, and that in itself can cost a lot of extra monies. Same with more fragile items, that you're going to have the same token problem, that essentially you're going to try to ship out the product, whatever it might be, and you're gonna not factor in that it's fragile, because although you might take careful precautions when it gets into the shipping process, you don't know how much it might jump around and stuff like that. So although you might want to say, hey, I'll just do fragile materials and not mention it's fragile, you're likely going to have that arrive in pieces when it gets to whatever location it's going to, and obviously, the buyer's not going to be happy, and you're not going to be happy, because that might result in a refund. And of course, once again, you come into this scenario where you're going to need insurance on that package. Insurance is pretty nice in that regard, but again, that's an extra cost. So, all these things need to be factored in when you're considering buying and selling on eBay and Amazon and so on and so forth. There's lots of different costs. Let me see here, for different fees and things like that. You got fragile fees and just different ways that it's packaged, and just a value on insurance and other things, and postage, and all these other fees that you might not even think exist. But there's extra costs, whether it's shipping internationally or something like that. Another thing to mention is that if you are shipping something, for example, out of country, that's going to cost extra monies too, especially if it's fragile, and especially if it's hazardous, because it's going to have to do some very careful transportation, and it's going to go through a lot of places that aren't exactly steady in regards to just riding on a truck or something like that, whether you're going to have to ship it through plane or something like that, or through some variation of freight, depending on where you're located. These things can add up to a lot of costs. Outside of that, in general, it's potentially practical, but these are just some things to keep in mind. If you guys have any other suggestions of things that might be dangerous to ship online, or that you've had trouble selling, that is something to consider as well. Another thing worth mentioning is that, the older things like DVDs and VHS tapes, although you might get them really cheap at a flea market, they're not all that popular anymore to sell online. Now, of course, there's some rare ones. Obviously, there's going to be value in that. But you go back to, let me see here. Where's the sold? I think I just passed it. That the sold and the completed listings, and you want to make sure that whatever you're trying to sell is selling, and that it's ultimately worth it for you as the seller. Of course, if you're new to eBay and you just want to build up feedback, it might be viable. I have another video on that in this video series, so you can check that out if you're interested. Thanks for stopping by, and I will list any others. I'll be doing like an article here in I don't know, next couple days, maybe a week or two, where it's basically going to list all the items that I recommend not selling. And I'm doing another video as well that you can look forward to. That'll be all the items that I think are worth selling and the ideal practical markups for that and how I set my pricing and things like that. So these are other videos coming up. So if that is something that you might be interested in, feel free to subscribe to the channel and like this video because that helps a lot, and share this video as well to anyone that you might know that might be interested in that's maybe newer to eBay. And that's about all I wanted to cover. So have a nice day. Anything else I think of, I will definitely list it in the articles I plan on making here very soon. And you'll see some other videos popping up here. I recommend checking them out. And see you later on.